Hey guys, what's up? Jordan Orell here making my daily video on circumcision, and today I want to talk a little bit about my interview process. And so for those of you who haven't seen my other work, I also am the podcast host for Foragen. I do the Missing Piece podcast. It's another playlist on my YouTube channel. Go look that up if you haven't. We've only done 2 episodes so far, but are planning on doing a lot more in the upcoming months. The next episode coming out with Brendan Murata in probably on September 1st. We'll talk about his film American Circumcision. Get excited, it's going to be the best episode yet. And part of the reason for that is I have a little bit of a unique process with him, and I'd like to go into that process to illuminate that for you guys here today. Excuse me. So for the process of interviewing, the first thing I want to do is really get to know the interview subject and what the topic of the interview is going to be. So for the first interview, it was Jessica. We talked about intactivism because she's an intactivist, talked about her life as a mother, as a nurse. Second interview subject was Nathanael, very different. He was from France, immigrated to Israel, and was Jewish and worked at Foragen. Brendan is again very different from either of those two. He's a filmmaker and is an American man who supports Foragen, doesn't work at Foragen. And I had the great privilege of getting to know him over the course of several months, which is a huge advantage. For the other 2 podcasts, I did several interviews with them, so met with them multiple times, studied each interview, and then got to really understand them through repeated study. With Brendan, I've had, as I said, the privilege of meeting with him multiple times, sort of getting to pick his brain, see his thoughts on different subjects, see different sides of his personality, which has been really great. He also has a lot more material out there than either Jessica or Nathanael. And so it was really awesome to be able to study all of his different videos, all of his different podcasts. I've listened to all of them multiple times, as well as seen his film a couple times now. And by studying all of that, I looked at all of the questions that other people have asked him, his responses, recorded all of those, summaries of all of those, and kind of thought of questions that I'd like to ask him over time, and really gotten a feel of who he is, what he has to say, and what his message is, what his film represents. And then now the process is, now that I have all the questions that I might want to ask him, all the questions that other people have asked him, all the things he has to say, the next step in the process is to really weed through those questions and find the ones that fulfill several purposes. First of all, showing who he is, so people can get that insight into understanding him. Second of all, show his best side, which is really related to the first thing I said. So get to know him through the lens of the most interesting things he has to say, pick out the really good questions. I'd throw out probably 50 to 90% of stuff that people say and the questions, because they're just not the best answers. They're not very interesting. They're not very helpful. I also look at it through the lens of what is helpful to the people who are listening to the podcast, so the people at Foragen or other people who may have just potentially stumbled across this, who are learning about Foragen for the first time. What light does it paint us in? What light does it how does it affect people in terms of how they relate to intactivism, or how they relate to Brendan's film, or how they relate to Foragen. So giving them value in some way is really important, and I look at how does each question and each answer really serve the needs of the community. How does it make them better at maybe coping with circumcision? How does it make them better at thinking about Foragen, better at sharing Foragen? How does it offer them frames that will be more hopeful, that will be more again, effective in really thinking about 4Gen and how they can contribute to 4Gen. How does it help them think about the issue and understand the issue of circumcision better? And also, another thing is, how does it sort of portray myself? Do I have something interesting to say? If there's something Brendan could talk a lot about that I just don't have any response to, that I can't contribute to that conversation, I also think about how to paint myself in a good light and to, say or have topics that I can actually speak to, in addition to ones that he wants to speak about. What do I want to ask? What's my contribution to this? And so, through this process, I look at each of these questions, thinking about what answers he will say, how I'll respond to that, what value that provides the audience, and ultimately then, how does the conversation flow? I look at every single question and see, does one flow into the next? I go through, organize them, reorganize them, reorganize them, merge together questions, which ones go together, what's the overall order of the different sections, as well as what are the questions within those sections. And so I have almost the whole interview ready to go before. The first interview was actually pretty much totally scripted. The second one, we knew the questions that we were going to ask. It wasn't so scripted. This one's going to be a lot more live flow, although I still know most of what I want to talk about, most of the questions, most of the things I want to say. Hopefully I'll ask some new questions he hasn't been asked before that will surprise him, and then I'll have a response that might surprise me. But I really like to craft this interview in a way, because I know he has so many wonderful, valuable things to say, and I think the way to get the most value out of that is really to look at everything that he's ever said before and then try to really present the best version of that, as well as present my frame of it, my view of it, my response to it, what interesting do I have to say about it. And it's a science, it's an art, and it's really a process that is kind of fun once you get into the flow of it, and really starting to see this whole thing coming together in your mind. And then finally, the last step is actually to also practice it, to keep on going through it, think about the questions, make sure I have them memorized, set them up somehow, or set up a sheet of paper or something that I can covertly look at while I'm doing it, and then do the interview, and hopefully be in a meditative state, be in a calm state, set up all the lighting and the sound and everything to make it good, and that's it. Yeah. So that's the basic interview process. There's a lot more details than that have gone into it along the way. It might be less intensive if I was better at it. I have thought of that. Maybe I wouldn't need to micromanage it so much if I could think on my feet better. But it's worked really well for me, and I think the podcasts have been good, and as I continue to do it, it'll probably continue to transform and get easier and get better. So I'm excited to see where it continues to go, and I'm really, really excited for this interview. It's I've known since about a year ago. It's probably the one I'm most excited for. I've talked about this interview with both my last podcast guests, who, as I said, Jessica, we recorded a year ago, and we were talking about Brendan's film back then. So really, really excited for this. It's gonna be something. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope this provided some value to you. I know it's a little different than what I usually do. It's kind of an in-depth look at something in my life, but I've been doing this all day for the last couple days, really all week. And so it's kind of what I'm consumed with right now, and so it's just useful to me to just do this rather than try to go into some. It's also kind of getting pretty late, so I need to sleep. I can't have the creative juice to think of creative topics right now. So this is what you get. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you all tomorrow. Peace out.